You are alone in your bedroom. The house is quiet in that heavy, late-night way when all the background noise of the day has finally died. The TV is off. The dishwasher has finished its cycle. The last cars have passed on the street outside. You can hear the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the tick of the thermostat on the wall, the gentle whoosh of the air coming through the vents above your bed. You are scrolling on your phone, eyes half closed, the blue light making everything feel a little distant, a little unreal. You flip the screen off, the room goes dark. That is when you hear it. Not a creak, not a pipe, not the old house settling. You know those sounds by now. This is different. It is a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in the air current above you. A soft, irregular scrape from inside the duct. A faint exhale that does not sound mechanical. It sounds wet, human. You stare up at the vent above your bed. The slats are just dark lines in the ceiling. You tell yourself it is your imagination. You roll over, pull the covers up, try to slow your breathing, and then you hear the whisper. It is so soft you are not even sure you heard it. A breath close to the vent, like someone pressing their lips to the metal grill. Just inches from your face, separated only by drywall and darkness. They are saying your name. That icy feeling that starts at the base of your spine and climbs, vertebra by vertebra, into your skull. That is the moment your world changes forever. Because suddenly, a thought you have never allowed into your mind before forces its way in. What if you are not alone in this house? What if someone else has been here the whole time, watching you, listening to you, breathing quietly behind the walls, under the floor, above the ceiling, slipping out only when you are at work or asleep or in the shower, moving your things, eating your food, standing over your bed at night, staring down through the vent, close enough to see your chest rise and fall in the dark. That nightmare has a name. It is called phrogging. Tonight, we are going to walk through the history of this hidden horror. From century-old murder cases to modern 911 calls, from crawl spaces to closets to the dark, crochet world inside your air vents. Because somewhere, right now, someone is listening to this story from a stolen Wi-Fi connection, sitting perfectly still in the attic above a stranger's bedroom, and the person sleeping directly below them has no idea. Phrogging sounds like a joke when you first hear it. It is spelled with a PH instead of an F, like some underground hacker term. The word comes from the idea of a frog hopping from place to place, never staying anywhere too long. To frog is to live secretly inside a home or building you do not own, while the rightful occupants are still living there. It is not the same as squatting in an abandoned house. It is not a standard break-in or a smash-and-grab burglary. Phrogging is parasitic. It is intimate. It is someone choosing not just to violate your space, but to share it with you, silently, without consent. As if your life were a reality show they get to watch for free. Most people only discovered the word in the last decade. As news articles started to connect cases and a TV docuseries popularized the term. But the behavior it describes is not new. The history of phrogging is far older than the internet slang used to label it. Long before we had cheap cameras and motion detectors, people told stories of ghosts that rearranged the furniture, vanished food they swore they had just bought, and strange smells in houses that should have been empty. Sometimes the haunting turned out to be more human than anyone expected. One of the earliest and most infamous cases happened in Denver, Colorado, in the early 1940s. The newspapers would come to call him the Spider-Man of Denver. Philip Peters was an elderly man, a retired rail worker, living alone in a modest house. His wife was in the hospital recovering from an injury, and the neighbors looked in on him from time to time. He was a creature of routine. Unbeknownst to him, another man had moved into his house. The man was named Theodore Edward Coneys, a homeless drifter who had known Peters years earlier. One cold night in 1941, Coneys went to the old man's house to ask for help. No one answered the door. He tried the handle. It was unlocked. He let himself in. Wandering through the rooms, he found something unusual. A tiny, unused closet that led up into a cramped attic crawl space. It was barely big enough for a grown man to lie down in. But to someone who had been sleeping under bridges and in alleys, it must have felt like a palace. Coneys decided to stay. For weeks, he lived in that cramped space. He would wait until Peters left the house, then slip down silently to steal food, water, whatever he needed. When he heard the front door, he would rush back up the closet and pull the hatch closed. The neighbors began to whisper that Peters was growing forgetful. Food seemed to vanish from his pantry. Doors he swore he had locked would be open in the morning. They blamed age. They blamed stress. They did not blame the attic. One night, Peters came home earlier than usual and caught Coneys outside the attic entrance. Startled, trapped, the hidden man panicked. He grabbed a heavy object and beat Peters to death in his own home. The police arrived to find a locked house, a dead man, and no sign of a killer. Neighbors told them the house had been haunted for weeks. Strange noises, odd smells, lights going on and off. Officers searched the rooms, the basement, the yard. Somehow, they never checked the tiny crawl space. For months after the murder, Coneys stayed right where he was. Think about that. Detectives, forensic technicians, family members, newspapermen, they all walked through the house, tracing bloodstains, speculating over clues. while the killer lay perfectly still, just a few feet above their heads. It was only when new tenants eventually moved in and heard noise from the ceiling that police searched the attic again. They found a filthy, emaciated man who had been living like a spider in the rafters, watching the lives of the people below. A human haunting a proto-frog. Cases like that got retold as urban legends for decades. But for most of the 20th century, they were rare enough to feel like freak occurrences, a bizarre footnote in true crime history. Then, the cameras came as security systems got cheaper and internet connections faster. More people install baby monitors, Wi-Fi webcams, smart doorbells, and suddenly, the little things people had always brushed off as forgetfulness or the house settling were being recorded. Hiding places once thought impossible vents, crawl spaces, drop ceilings were being found, and a sickening pattern emerged. In 2008, in a quiet Japanese town, a man living alone began to notice small changes. Yogurt missing from the refrigerator. Rice he did not remember cooking. Doors he was certain he had locked. He thought he was losing his mind. Finally, he installed a hidden camera in his kitchen, connected to his phone. He left for work. Hours later, he checked the live feed. What he saw did not belong in reality. A cabinet door above the refrigerator opened from the inside. A small figure unfolded itself and dropped silently onto the floor. It was an older woman, thin, dirty, her hair matted. She moved with the slow assurance of someone who had done this many times. She padded quietly to the sink, drank water, rummaged through the fridge, turning labels back around exactly the way they had been. When she was done, she wiped her mouth, looked around, then climbed back into the cabinet and slid the door closed, vanishing from sight. Police arrived and searched the tiny apartment. At first, they found nothing. Then they looked above the kitchen. Behind the cabinet, through a small opening, there was a hidden storage space under the roof. Someone had laid out bedding, personal items, and a change of clothes. The woman confessed she had been living there for almost a year. No forced entry, no shattered windows. Just patience, opportunity, and a blind spot in the architecture. The man had not been alone in his home for a very long time. He just had not realized he had a roommate. In 2012, in an American suburb, a woman started hearing noises in the attic above her bedroom. Scraping, footsteps. She told herself it was raccoons. Then she noticed bits of insulation on the floor near the air vent in her ceiling. A smell, sweat, and cigarette smoke seemed to seep from the ducts at night. She would wake up with the uneasy, prickling certainty that someone had been watching her sleep. One day, she came home to find a nail on the floor and a small piece of drywall broken around the vent above her bed. It looked like someone had been trying to widen the opening from the other side. She called a relative to help her check the attic. They pushed open the hatch and shined a flashlight into the dark. There, among the beams and insulation, was a nest. A pile of cushions, a sleeping bag, crumpled food wrappers, a cup for urine. And scattered around it were things from her life, her clothes, photographs of her children, handwritten notes, even a pair of her shoes neatly lined up. It was not a stranger, it was her ex. He had been released from jail months earlier. Instead of leaving town, he had climbed into the attic of his former girlfriend's house and stayed. From there, he had unscrewed a vent cover and watched her from above. Night after night, breathing quietly as she undressed, as she slept, as she walked around her bedroom, living a life she believed was private. He crawled out while she was at work to eat, drink, and use the bathroom. Sometimes he moved things. Sometimes he wrote in a journal about her, about them. He listened to her phone calls, her private arguments, her secrets. He was not breaking in to steal. He was not breaking in to leave. He had turned her home into a theater and made her the main character. And his seat was in the vents. This is the part of phrogging that burrows into the primitive corners of your brain. It is not just about the risk of theft or even violence. It is about the annihilation of the boundary between public and safe. You lock your door, you draw your curtains, and you assume that means something. Phrogging laughs at that assumption. Because the truth is, your walls are hollow. The modern history of phrogging began to crystallize as law enforcement started to compare notes. Police reports from all over the world began to pile up with the same peculiar details. Missing food, rearranged items, strange smells, sounds in the walls. Then the eventual discovery of a hidden cache of belongings under a staircase, behind a false wall, or, very often, in the bowels of a heating and ventilation system. Vents are everywhere, but you do not really see them. You might glance at the one on your bedroom ceiling when you dust. You might feel the warm air on your face in winter. But you rarely think about where those ducts actually go, how many twists and turns they take through the interior of the house, how often they run through attics, basements, and crawl spaces big enough for a human to lie down inside. In one case, a family kept hearing rattling in their ventilation system at night. They called HVAC technicians, who blamed loose fittings, temperature changes, normal duct noise. The family accepted it. It was only when their teenage daughter woke up one night to the sound of heavy breathing right above her bed that they called the police. Officers arrived and did not just glance with a flashlight from the attic hatch. They crawled deep into the ductwork, following the bends and corners, tucked into a widened section of the metal trunk line. They found a blanket, a backpack, some stolen electronics, and a small stack of food wrappers. Someone had been squeezing into the main duct, using it as a tunnel to move through the house. At night, while the system was off, he would unscrew vent covers from the inside and watch the sleeping occupants through the slats. From the outside, the vents looked untouched, perfectly normal. It was only from within that the damage could be seen, the screws stripped, the metal slightly bent by fingers pushing them aside. When officers finally arrested the man, he explained then the flat, effectless tone that makes your skin crawl, that he liked the vents because it felt like living in the wires of a machine. He said he felt invisible, untouchable. He was wrong. But he had been invisible long enough. Why do people do this? The answer is not simple, and it is not comforting. Some Phroggers are homeless, mentally ill, and desperate. The world has no place for them, so they slip into the cracks, into the spaces between. To them, an unlocked back door or an open garage is an opportunity for warmth, for a meal, for a night without fear of being beaten or arrested on the street. Others are predators. They are not breaking in to escape the cold. They are breaking in to have access, to be near someone specific, an ex-partner, a crush, a stranger they fixated on from a distance. They want control without confrontation, to puppeteer a life without ever being seen. And some, perhaps the most unsettling of all, seem to be thrill seekers. They talk about the rush of hiding just a few feet away from the people who own the house, of listening to the household jokes, the arguments, the tears. They treat human lives like TV channels they can change by moving to a new house, a new vent, a new closet. They move from house to house like frogs between lily pads, because that is the thing about phrogging that makes your stomach twist. It is rarely a one-time event. People who develop a taste for this kind of invisible living often do it more than once. When they are finally caught, investigators ask the same question. Is this the first time you have done this? The answers are often chilling. No, I have done this before. How many times? A shrug, a smile, enough. The more we have learned about phrogging, the more it has forced us to reconsider old stories. Think about all the times someone has sworn their house was haunted because food went missing from the pantry. They heard footsteps in the attic when all the kids were downstairs. Lights turned on and off when no one was home. Doors they locked were somehow unlocked in the morning. The TV remote moved from the coffee table to the arm of the couch. They woke up to the smell of cigarette smoke. No one in the house smoked. Sometimes, those stories are exactly what they seem. Creaks and drafts and human forgetfulness feeding superstition, but not always. There are documented cases where people called paranormal investigators burned sage and set up voice recorders. only to discover much later that the ghost had fingerprints, body odor, and a criminal record. A family in one Midwestern town was convinced their old house was cursed. The children heard tapping in the walls at night. The parents would find toys moved or missing. Doors slammed upstairs when everyone was in the living room. They called a priest to bless the home. Months later, a neighbor noticed movement in an upstairs window when the family was away. He called the police. Officers entered the house expecting a burglary. Instead, they found a man in his 20s living in a small, triangular void behind a built-in bookshelf in the kids' room. He had carved a peephole into the wall directly behind a poster. From there, he had watched the children sleep. He had been in the house on and off for weeks. Imagine being those parents, replaying every ghost story their kids had told them. Every time they had dismissed their fear as imagination, only to learn there had been someone real, someone solid on the other side of the drywall. Sometimes the supernatural would be a mercy compared to the truth. As the stories stacked up, the media finally took notice. The term phrogging started appearing in headlines. A docuseries brought survivors on camera to tell their stories' shaky 911 calls. Footage from hidden bedroom cameras, photographs of filthy attic nests and makeshift beds under basement stairs. And yet, for every case that gets reported, there are likely more that never make the news. Because the line between a weird feeling and a confirmed crime is a hard one to cross. How many people will call the police because their peanut butter seems to be disappearing faster than usual? How many landlords will take a tenant seriously when they say, "I think someone is living in my vents"? It usually takes something undeniably camera capture. A footprint where no one should have been. A noise that is too loud, too close, too obviously human. Or it takes blood. In one city, a woman living alone began to smell something foul coming from her bathroom vent. Maintenance cleaned the ducts. The smell came back. Water pressure in the shower dropped, lights flickered. She felt watched all the time. It became a heavy, suffocating paranoia. She started sleeping with the TV on, facing the bathroom door. One night, she woke up to a loud crash from the bathroom and what sounded like a choked scream. When she opened the door, she found the vent cover lying on the floor, screws scattered, and a streak of fresh blood on the tile. The rest of the night was silent. Police found a man wedged inside the wall behind the tub. He had been trying to widen his access point from a narrow maintenance panel, using the vents as a private tunnel. In the process, he slipped and cut himself badly. He was trapped there when officers pulled him out. He had been living in a vacant unit in the building, accessing her apartment's walls through a shared crawlspace. He admitted he had watched her through the vent in the bathroom, in the bedroom. He knew her schedule, her friends' names, the shows she watched before bed. She had always locked her front door. He had never used it. If the history of Phrogging feels like a horror anthology, it is because it follows the same rule over and over. You are not crazy for feeling watched. That creeping sense that something is off in your own home, that the air feels different, that objects are not exactly where you left them, that is your brain's ancient threat detection system firing. The same system that made our ancestors survive in the wild by noticing broken twigs and disturbed leaves is still inside you. It just has drywall and HVAC to work with now. Unfortunately, our modern habits blunt that instinct. We blame stress. We blame our memory. We laugh it off and make jokes about ghosts. We assume that because we have a lock and a camera at the front door, we are safe inside. But ask any cop who has answered a Phrogging call what they think about that. Ask the 911 operator who took a call from a whispering woman hiding in her own bedroom closet, telling the dispatcher she could hear someone walking in the crawlspace overhead. The tapes are chilling, the operator trying to keep her calm. The distant sound of movement, the woman stifling a sob as she says, "He's right over me. I can hear him breathing." Ask the search teams who follow scuffed dust and stray candy wrappers through narrow attic spaces for hours, only to find a hollow where a body had been still warm. Ask the maintenance worker who opened what he thought was a sealed wall panel and locked eyes with a stranger, staring back at him from the darkness. These people will tell you that the worst part is not the discovery. The worst part is realizing how long it had been going on before anyone noticed. If this feels like a